Welcome to overanalyzing every single chapter in Houseki no Kuni because you can't stop talking about it and it's becoming a problem and you friends haven't watched the series, so in order to not spoil them, you're making videos instead. Anyway, we will be spoiler warning for anything, any manga related to Houseki no Kuni because I may mention stuff that's up to the latest chapter, which is 105 currently. So in the comments, let me know if there's anything else you observe, because don't know everything. So if you can relate more things to Buddhism, great, because I am not as good as that. I haven't watched enough Buddhism analysis videos to fully analyze that. So I'll have you people in the comments observe and overanalyze things to add to my overanalysis so that we can truly cover everything. Now, one thing I want to say that I didn't say in the last chapter was that I think it's really cool how uh, how the author sets up that the characters can be absorbed into the, I don't know how to say this race's name, the we'll just call them Ventricosis' race. For some reason, I can say Ventricosis, but I can't say Amaryllis or whatever they're called. Anyway, um, they the snail people. You know what? Let's just call them the snail people. Anyway, um, the Ichikawa sets up so early that that the gems can be absorbed into the snail people's shells, and that's really cool because later it's a plot point later with them eating the dust on the moon that makes up the gems. And so I just think that it's like crazy how far in the future that gets called back to, and that being the like one of the first main things that happens in the beginning of the series. So it's just very interesting, and I want to say that's excellent foresight on the author. Now back to the main action sequence. So we have both of the diamonds here. We have Board looking down and Dia looking up, and I think does Dia meet Cinnabar in this chapter? No, Dia meets Cinnabar next chapter. But one thing that Cinnabar mentions in the next chapter is that Dia is always looking up. So I find it interesting that Dia is also is Dia looking up? Like Dia's looking up just because their face is facing that way, but and Bort's looking down at the spot. Anyway, and Dia's just calling out for Phos to try and do something. All right. Now Dia's looking down, trying to get Phos. But anyway, Dia and Bort look at each other, and this is where Dia and Bort work together here. See, um, they both crash on the weak point that Phos highlights by being Phos and being weak and being absorbed in the shell. Um, and Bort, even though Dia is trying to help, Bort is trying to protect Dia. And that's just how the relationship is. But see, they both help with opening the shell here and making the snail creature Ventricosis upset. Uh, all right, and then they push him into the water. And you see that Jade and Euclid are kind of on the side, just observing what's happening. Um, yep. So yeah, then they're like, that was easy. It was just a giant slug all along. It's drinking in the salt water. Um, a second to think if that idiot hadn't got captured. And you see how Bort puts a lot of blame on Phos. I guess it's because of how tactical Bort is. And that's probably like I guess that shows like why they're so cold-hearted to Phos later, even though they do team up with Phos later. But they're so tactical and so like tactics first over like care for the person. That's why they're so easy. That's why Bort so easily drew the line when Phos did what Phos did during the war arc, because Bort's immediately identified Phos as now an enemy to them, and Bort was not going to stand on that, whereas all the other characters were still conflicted with them being their friends. And so that's just how Bort is. Bort is very good at drawing tactical lines like that. So, and of course, Bort kind of, is Bort also is very easily able to spot other characters' flaws, like with Zircon, it's there. But in here, it's also like Bort saying like, "Oh, Phos shouldn't have just gotten captured," even though there could be other reasons. Um, and then Dia is always thinking nicely of Phos or the opposite of Bort and trying to defend Phos. Um, and I think Dia also here is appealing for themselves too, saying that like Phos at least tried to do something. Shouldn't you give Phos a little credit? And Bort's like, eh, you expect me to praise that imbecile? Like that could be seen as Dia trying to help too, and that's how Dia views Bort and how Bort acts. Uh, uh, yeah, and so then they go try to find the pieces, and all they find is a little snail because Phos is the shell. Um, yeah, did you find Phos mode? Uh, and of course they're just talking about how Phos always causes trouble. There must be something left to find. Big enough to whatever. And of course these are the tactics people, so they're trying to think about that. And even if this is Phos, again, it's not. We know it's not Phos, but Phos is later in the frame. And Dia looking out at the sea and saying, "Where did you go?" kind of foreshadows that Phos is in there. I mean, of course they know that, but Phos is the shell and that sort of thing. This is kind of cute with Dia just being like Phos and thinking that it's Ventricrosis. I have a feeling that Ventricrosis is probably just excited whenever Dia speaks because of how Ventricrosis is. So that probably is just how it was. And of course, we know that Ventricrosis likes Dia very much, so yeah. And they're all kind of shocked. Um, I love Rutile's face right here. It's so good. It's just so funny. Rutile's like, "What is this thing? Can I dissect it? Can I kill it? Can I murder it?" Um, yes. So, and of course, like, I'm betting it was Phos. Rutile always assumes it was Phos. I'm guessing because Rutile's had to put Phos back together several times, so it's probably something Rutile's very familiar with. And then just the shock on Rutile's face when they're given this instead. Um, and if this is kind of like showing them and their like how they look down on humans, but they don't even know what humans are, just with saying that they're inferior life forms, like the way animals are. Uh, I also find Rutile thinking they're constantly joking funny, which in this situation, you would. And as Jade's like, it's a status report, it's not a joke. Um, and it also shows that Jade is kind of like a no nonsense person. Uh, and Rutile like doesn't see that or something. But yeah, dissect it. It's blood. It'll die if you dissect it. That sort of thing. Uh, you know what? Interesting. This is what Bort says. Inferior life forms. This is what the idiots become. Because they see humans as inferior, and later Phos becomes somewhat human. So it's interesting that it's foreshadowing. Just is so good if it is foreshadowing, or if I'm not over analyzing every single thing of this. Um, and this is just supposed to show how foreign the concept of like humans are to them. Um, something before Sensei wakes up. Uh, and you see how Bort is also like no nonsense. Like no one's taken to the moon, so Bort leaves. We also see here that Euclid and Jade take responsibility for it, and that's one thing that's like very nice to see with the characters in this story. But it kind of contributes to Phos's downfall a little bit, just in the fact that whenever something happens to Phos, in this case, it was kind of like a little bit more gray because um it was kind of on you and Jade to watch Phos a little more, I guess. I don't know. But we see that Euclid and Jade take responsibility for it. And kind of like apologize or just say that it's not entirely Phos's fault, which happens every single time, Phos messes up. Like, Phos is never fully blamed for anything because the characters are always putting it on themselves for why Phos turned out this way, um, which is very interesting because usually the characters in a story would be like, "Oh no, it's your fault" or something, and so it's very interesting how the characters in this story act in that regard and how it kind of hinders it because Phos never really takes time to reflect on how their actions have led them to what happened to them. And then this is when like Yuke says that Phos like protected Dia's arm and stuff. It's time to save your arm at least. And, Dai is very nice. She's like, don't worry, Phos. I promise I'll change it back. See, I believe Daya has such a connection to Phos because, like I said before, like, Phos really praises Daya, and Daya appreciates that. Um, and I'm wondering you turned this because I suggested that you tried games. And then you can see that Daya is reflecting on their actions. Daya is reflecting on their actions. Kind of like saying, like, is this the reason why Phos changed this way? Because Daya didn't want Phos to change so drastically, what Daya is saying. Uh, and then, Daya is saying, like, oh, I was afraid of that, because Daya feels bad that Phos felt like they needed to change in such a drastic way. Anyway, let's go ask around. And then they ask all the people, and man, it's funny, but it's sad, because it shows how much all the characters really don't pay that mind to Phos, because they realize, like, oh, and then Morg's like, isn't what's wrong with them staying like this? I mean, it's like Phos, but well behaved, but gross, and all that. And Ventricosis is just being Ventricosis. Um, Goshen, I feel like has like a little bit like more compassion for Phos, but again, like they don't feel like to go out of their way to help Phos because to them it doesn't seem like a big deal if Phos is in this state or if Phos is the way they were before. But at least Goshen is like, oh, at least Phos is healthy that way, This part's funny because they're like, oh man, Phos is useless the way. Phos is always useless. Sad but funny in the delivery of it. Bennett really just speaks their mind, which is kind of funny. Anyway, there's not much to his as president's wise. That's Zircon. And then Himenephrite, is that how you say? Um, now you don't have to worry about taking Mandalorians, which is true. But it seems that no one is interested in turning back Phos the way they are. And that's kind of how it is through the series. Well, of course, it's a little impossible for them to do so to get Phos's pieces back, but no one's interested in trying to return Phos to how they used to be, And that kind of is why they value Phos's capabilities, so they don't see a point in returning Phos to how they were previously, which is a lot more mentally stable. They don't care about Phos's mental stability, they care about Phos's ability to contribute to society. Which I guess can kind of reflect sometimes how our societies view things as well. And then this is when Daya starts to realize from Phos's perspective a little bit how Phos is viewed by other people. And this kind of gets more compassionate of Daya because I don't think Daya really understood until this point how being Phos actually is like. If you're not nice to people on a regular basis, then they won't help you when you need it. And that kind of reflects Daya's perspective on it too, and that's probably why Daya overall acts like a really nice person. Like Phos complimented Daya before and how nice they were, and it could just be seen by Daya that they're being nice so that like people will help them later. And so this is like a core concept for Daya, and Daya is like reflecting that in Phos that Phos needs to be nicer to people, Moss, are you listening? Don't eat the grass, it's barbaric. And then you just see, Androgoses. It's interesting. I guess it makes sense for them to know the words like eat and stuff, but they've never done it just because they raise like jellyfish and animals like that. It's always going to be funny to me the moment when Phos like actually eats something for the first time, and it's like that scene's a little funny. Anyway, maybe you don't want my help, or maybe you don't want any of my help. Maybe if you change that completely, you don't have to worry how anyone else sees you, or compare yourselves to anyone. You don't have to be jealous or put off on any kind of act. And so this is really introspection on Daya right here, because we know that this isn't Phos. Phos isn't going to get any of this knowledge. But Daya is realizing that that because of Phos's drastic change, of course Phos didn't change, but Daya is thinking it must be nice to not compare yourself to someone else, because now Phos is uncomparable to all the gems. Phos. You don't have to worry about anyone else sees you. And you see that this is just Daya wanting to like break the mold of a diamond, and not have to live in Bort's shadow. And we can tell that, like, Daya is very jealous of Bort and puts on an act. I think, and that Daya puts on this act of liking Bort. Like, Daya is always complimenting Bort to be nice, and I guess Daya does that so that Bort will help them. But at the same time, because Bort helps them so much, they build up this jealousy. It's very. That's why people say that their relationship is very toxic. Um, are you happy this way? Like Daya asks. Um, but don't go yet. I guess because like Daya wants Phos to be as they were, and Daya wants them to exist. And this is kind of like a similarity to how Phos was with Cinnabar, except Phos isn't as, you know, far gone as Cinnabar in terms of purpose and stuff. But and of course this isn't Phos. That's the funny thing. When I watched this in the anime for the first time, I genuinely believed like this was Phos, but looking back on it now, it's just funny. But you know, Daya here is just talking about how Daya wants Phos to still be there, and that's kind of like how Phos wants Cinnabar to still be there. It's kind of like that. And it shows that like these bonds that we make with people is why we exist in the first place, you know. Let's just ask around a little longer. I'm sure there's someone out there. And, you know, this is for Cinnabar, and this is Daya trying to find someone that wants Phos around. And so even though Cinnabar, like, complains about Phos nonstop, you know, Cinnabar wants Phos around because Phos is that person for them. Because Phos is the person who wants Cinnabar around, where none of the other characters seem to want them around either. And, you know, I'm sure there's someone out there, you know, who wants Phos to be around, and then it goes to Cinnabar, who's actively reaching out for the notebook that Phos made. And, yeah, Cinnabar, you know. Someone who needs you. Yeah. Someone who wants Phos to exist, someone who Phos needs. And that's the reason why Phos hasn't given up on existence yet. And that's the only reason why, and that's why we get a cut of Cinnabar here, because Cinnabar is clinging on to the fact that Phos has found it in themselves to make their purpose finding Cinnabar purpose. It's very nice. It's a very nice concept. I'm sure nothing bad will happen due to that. So we'll go over 6 next. Also, I guess we'll cover it in 6. Never mind. Anyway, let me know if you have anything to add about these scenes and what you thought of this chapter in general and what you think it relates to the entire story. Alright, well, I'll see you in chapter 6.